We are live. This is Indiana Hoosiers Live 29. We have a slightly different look today. If you notice, it's just me on the screen. There is no Brad. If you saw Brad's tweet today about the episode, he is in Europe. So there's going to be no Brad. Kind of a funny story. He reached out to me late last week. He was packing and he was like, "Hey man, like I just gotta like tell you, like I'm not gonna be able to do the show next week. I'm going to be in Europe." I'm like, "Oh, dude, that's sick. Like, have a good time. Good luck. Have fun." He's like, "Yeah, sorry about the late notice." Like, late notice? Like, what do you mean? I feel like this is plenty of time. He's like, "Well, I've known for 3 weeks." So there's Brad in a nutshell. But shout out to Brad. So flying solo today, definitely going to look a little different. It's going to be a lot of me talking. So for that, I do apologize. But if you got thoughts, comments, concerns, hop them in the chat. Um, there is a little bit of smoke this week that I'm going to get the 25 burning questions I have about Indiana football and Indiana basketball combined. But I did want to start today with the Pacers are in the middle of the NBA playoffs battling right now. I think they were down like 15-20 last time I checked, but it's so hard to think about the NBA right now, given I'm a Celtics fan and what happened to Jason Tatum last night. Absolutely heartbreaking, gut wrenching. Like the last thing you want to see. This dude is a like not a once in a generation type player, but he's an elite player, like top 5 in the league. And to have a guy go down like that is just absolutely heartbreaking. So he'll come back better. But for Celtics fans to have the next 18 months of basketball essentially like wiped away in the blink of an eye, it was just I can kick NBA basketball to the side for a little bit. So we're gonna jump right in here. A little bit of smoke. I did say last week or for a couple weeks that we're not going to really see Signetti make media appearances until they come back in the spring. That wasn't necessarily a false statement. I did, I guess, mean from or through the school, but we did get an appearance with Greg McElroy on Always College Football. There were a couple different things Signetti said there. The thing that stuck out to me the most is what I wrote about last week for voiceofcollegefootball.com, vocfb.com. He stated that last year they moved the quarterback 0.25% of the time. If you know, obviously last year Curtis Rourke was the Indiana quarterback, tore his ACL in August, and nobody really knew. It was obvious he didn't really move much. It was funny. I threw on the Nebraska game, and I'll get to another takeaway from that in a second. And he was moving a little bit in there, but it wasn't really cutting. It wasn't side to side, and it wasn't designed. It was really straight up the middle. But less than 1% of the time to move the quarterback off the spot is actually insane. The fact that they had so much success in a college offense that predicates itself on that, like, you have to move the defense, and the best way to move the defense is to move the quarterback. And that just wasn't an element of Indiana's offensive attack at all last year. But to hear that number be so low was insane, because the things we've been hearing about Fernando Mendoza over and over again is the mobility he then uses to throw the ball with is really impressive. He talked about the offensive line, talked about it going 8 deep. This is something Brad and I have been talking about for a couple weeks on here. He said it's going to be better than last year. And if you think about the upgrades they made, you bring in Pat Coogan at center. You bring in Zen Mikowski at right tackle, who played not all the time, but did get playing time at Ohio State, especially in a Bob Bostad system where he seems to make guys better. It's not out of the realm of possibility that Indiana's offensive line gets better this year, and the freshman or redshirt freshman pushing that starting unit. A lot of really good players in that room, so it's something to be excited about. Again, he keeps raving about Mendoza. Really, really good player. The quote that was circulating around was, you have to have on-field success. The on-field success they had last year to get a guy like Fernando Mendoza. So it's just, I think at some point, if you got a candid, obviously all conversations with Sig are candid, but if you sat down and you asked Sig who's the most talented quarterback he's ever coached, I don't think he would hesitate. And I think it's Fernando Mendoza. So that is, like, for Hoosier fans, Hoosier football fans, like, I know season tickets were the seat raffle or whatever was going on with the season tickets was this past week or this, like, yesterday or 2 days ago. Yeah, I'd be super pumped if I got season tickets, because this team's gonna be really exciting. They were number 2 in scoring offense last year, and like I said, they moved the quarterback off the spot 2.25% of the time. The other thing he said, and they asked him about how the current model of rev share is going to affect college football, and if he thought that Division II and Division III programs, or not even that, but just if college programs like Olympic sports could survive in this current model. And he said that a lot of people are going to be upset by this answer, especially in the Big Ten, but he thinks that D2 and D3 schools should get a cut of the rev share. And if that's what he's saying, that somebody who's coached at the Division II level has been up and down the spectrum of college football, like, It's hard pressed not to agree with them. So that was Sig on Always College Football with Greg McElroy. And obviously, anytime Sig talks to anybody, it's an awesome interview. So go check that out if you haven't. But like I said before, I was just like bored the other day. I tossed on the Nebraska, like Big Ten Plus had like during the season, every Sunday they would post the full football games, right? So I would like go in and like watch the games after they played. Sometimes if I wasn't able to catch them live, so I went digging for the Nebraska game the other day just because I was bored. I was looking for it. I wasn't able to find the full game, but what I did find out is that that game is now considered an Indiana Classics on Big Ten Network. So if anybody's a fan of scrolling through a cable on Big Ten Network, I agree, PK. Sig wouldn't compliment the line unless they're really, really good. But yeah, if you're a Big Ten Network guy, if you like scrolling through cable or YouTube TV or whatever, and you see Indiana Classics on there, like the 2024 games are on there now. But in that game, I posted a clip of a ridiculous catch by Omar Cooper, which like I think one of my projects over the summer is just going to be making a map of America and like marking the college towns where Omar Cooper has mossed somebody because the dude is just flat out ridiculous. Like maybe he doesn't have the volume stats that a lot of these top receivers have, but in terms of body control, going up, contested catches, like the dude is Omar Cooper is just ridiculous. Like I joke that somebody's gonna have to teach me to make TikTok edits, but like I think that's like what I'm gonna figure out how to do. And if you just start seeing TikTok edits come out for my account, like just know I figured it out. uh, I'll get to this one in a second, but there was the other funny thing that happened this week was obviously everybody's favorite, least favorite, whoever you want to call it, Indiana commenter Dan Dockich made waves responding to another Indiana player making a TikTok. Obviously, not a big deal about a player making a TikTok, but he made some comment, and Omar Ballo came out of nowhere and just dunked through his face with the hashtag Toxic Dockich. It was absolutely hilarious. I had to actually check if that was Omar Cooper's account or not Omar Cooper, Omar Ballo's account, and not like a fake account that responded like that. But that was absolutely hilarious. Did not see that one coming. And the Burner Army obviously got a huge kick out of that. And then the biggest football thing I kind of wanted to chew apart this week with Brad, but I honestly just don't have the energy to battle I'll call it stupidity because that's what it is. Obviously, this is Indiana Hoosiers Live at the Voice of College Football. I'm a huge fan of the Voice of College Football Network. I love the content they put out, love the people associated with it. They put out a graphic a couple days ago listing the top 10 teams in the Big Ten, and Indiana wasn't in the top 10. Like, it's just laughable at this point. If you're just going to look at strictly the Big Ten and not have this team in the top 10, it just tells me you're not paying attention. Like, we're talking about this team as pushing on the top 12 of the country with the opportunity to make some real noise and make some real statements and to look at what's going on in Bloomington, look at the landscape of the Big Ten and especially what happened last year and say this isn't a top 10 team in the Big Ten is just crazy. And it goes back to a point I made last week. And there was a Notre Dame fan actually that pointed this out in the comments. So shout out to that guy. But too many people are taking Indiana's football history, which is an awful football history, and projecting that towards what they're going to be this year. The people calling 2024 a fluke are saying a couple of things. One, that the coaching just wasn't good or the coaching isn't there anymore. That's not true. They retained every single coach but Tino Sinceri. They're saying that the talent wasn't good or the talent wasn't there anymore. And I've seen a lot of people call the players from last year's team mercenaries, people associated with Indiana, people not associated with Indiana. And I just don't love the term because I feel like they gelled so well as a team and they represented the university in such a way that they really weren't mercenaries, but they really just were a part of the fabric of this program. It's just, if you look at the way Cignetti builds his teams, if you look at the moves they made in the transfer portal, obviously we've been gushing about Mendoza for months and we're going to continue to do it. It's just, you're not paying attention to college football if you're not ranking this Indiana team accordingly. And too many people are looking at Indiana's history and saying, we can write them off because last year was an anomaly, when in fact, they should be looking at Curt Cignetti's history. And Curt Cignetti's history says he wins everywhere he goes and he wins consistently. And you showed he had the ability to show a blueprint for what his system and what his program looks like. And it produced a college football playoff team. Like maybe the general public doesn't see it, but even like they were number 17 in an ESPN ranking that came out last week. So it's not like they're being completely disrespected by the numbers. But like while the general public doesn't see it, like the recruiting like motion they have is ridiculous. Like the people who cover recruiting, the national pundits that are like say the right things when they talk about the players who are leaving Indiana, and it's just again like you're not paying attention if you're not ranking this team accordingly. Then the major thing that I mentioned last week, I didn't really get into it. Major story in college football that we really haven't seen how it's going to shake out yet. 24/7 and On3 merged. They are now going to become one company. I believe through the month of May, they are operating as they were. So you're still obviously seeing all the content you were seeing from 24/7. You're seeing all the content you were seeing from On3. But what's going to happen moving forward is On3 is going to take essentially all the college stuff. So that's going to be transfer portal and things like that, college recruiting, or however they said it was going to be broken down. And then 24/7 is going to take like the high school recruiting and that kind of stuff. My gut reaction to that, and I tweeted something along the lines of like it's going to shrink the scope of influence in college football, and to an extent that's true. You have these two companies essentially doing the same thing, competing. Now they're becoming one, so there's less voices in the space. But that being said, like I can't sit here and say it wasn't confusing as hell watching the analysts from both sides like tweet about certain players and talk about certain players, and like there was an offensive tackle who like just committed like last week or 2 weeks ago, and I swore that guy was going to be like getting ready to get drafted for how long he's been talked about. So having it's the information sorted in a way, knowing that going to On3 is going to be completely college based and going to 24/7 is going to be the more high school focused stuff helps somebody who's looking for information. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But in terms of like college football media and like I love the business side of sports and the back end workings and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a story that I'm really interested to see how that shakes out. And then it's funny. So when after Brad told me that he wasn't going to be available this week, I had kind of a loose plan to do a Darren DeVries deep dive and kind of break down coaching style and how the roster fits. And decided to go a different way for a couple of different reasons. But one of the main reasons being we are still waiting on roster news. There is potentially, not that I've seen a ton of smoke, but potentially they're looking to add somebody in the class of 25 even. Obviously, they're waiting on the waivers for Leal and Goody. We'll get to that in a second. But just doing a skim basically of the Indiana roster, like I guess a kiddie pool dive. It's obviously not a Big Ten or a roster that we're used to seeing in terms of like two bigs and like dominant size, but man, they got a lot of really exciting players and creators on this roster. A lot of guys that can score with the ball in their hands, score without the ball in their hands. You're going to see a lot of shooting, like a high percentage of like threes being made. And yeah, I'm really excited for this upcoming basketball season. I don't know. Again, it's going to be interesting to see how much success they have, and I'll get to this in a second. But just like looking at the pieces they brought in, it's like I'm not too worried that they don't have a true 7-footer on the roster. I think that they're going to be able to maneuver around it. All right. I said I had 25 questions about Indiana football and Indiana basketball. That's 25 total questions, not 25 each. Which again, I think would have been a little crazy, but I feel like definitely could have come up when Sig said we could be pretty good. That translates to yes, John. Welcome back, John. It's good to see you. But yeah, no, I completely agree. This guy, Sig's a guy who doesn't just throw things around. Like we talked about Sig calling people talented a couple weeks ago. Like Sig wouldn't just be heaping praise on the offensive line if they were bad. He'd be like, we need to improve. There is no sugarcoating things with this guy. And I think that's what a lot of people really enjoy about playing for him is that like he is honest. So yeah, when like kind of brings me back to his post spring game presser when they were like, do you have more playmakers on offense or bad tacklers on defense? And it made him laugh. It's like, no, he doesn't have bad tacklers on his 3 All-American defense. Like they got more juice in the rope. But I did slightly lie about the number of questions. I do have a couple half questions in here, so it's probably going to be closer to like 28, 30, but I digress. Let's get into the list. Question number 1 about Indiana football heading into 2025. What is the ceiling of Fernando Mendoza? Obviously, if you listened to the show last week, you know Brad and I think very highly of him. Brad's been calling him Andrew Luck since February. It's clear when you watch him throw the football mechanically, visually, you listen to him talk about football, like go for 50. Well, if the chat could come up with some questions, we'll keep adding them on to the end. But you'll see, I got 25 here, and we'll see if I miss anything. But yeah, when you talk about the ceiling of Fernando Mendoza, like it's not an accident he's being mocked in the top 5 of the NFL draft. Like he's being talked about as a top quarterback in the NFL, like for that draft. That being said, what does that mean for Indiana as a football team? You don't need to be the number one quarterback in the draft to run a really successful college team. When Curtis Rourke was picked in the 7th round, maybe that was injury related, maybe not. So you just have to be able to execute the offense. That being said, when you have somebody who's as talented and can play the position the way Fernando Mendoza does, it lifts the ceiling of your team. His biggest issue at Cal, and it wasn't lack of playmakers. You looked at like everyone who transferred off that, like Jaden Ott, the running back, went to Oklahoma. Jack Andrews, the tight end, went to Texas. They brought in Jonathan Brady, one of his receivers. He's at Indiana now. But it's not like they were void of playmakers. Like the problem for that team was the offensive line. So like people can make fun of his stats all you want, but he was sacked 43 times last year, or maybe it was 41. But like he's just not going to get hit that much at Indiana. He's going to have significantly more time to throw the football, and he wasn't throwing to anybody like Elijah Surratt or Omar Cooper, and it wasn't an offense that proved it could put up points like Indiana's offense. So I think he has a really, really high ceiling. And then question 1.5 being, what does his mobility mean at the position? So kind of talked about Rourke literally moving off the spot 0.25% of the time, which is ridiculous. D'Angelo Pons, again, has gone out of his way to say multiple times. Oh, my God, I totally forgot, actually. So D'Angelo Pons, speaking of Pons, he threw out the first pitch against Purdue over the weekend on Friday, and Indiana blanked Purdue for the first time in school history. So that's not surprising. Obviously, every time Purdue sees D'Angelo Pons, terrified. I would be too if I was that university, so it makes complete sense. But the thing that Pons continually highlights about Mendoza is his ability to move and throw the football on the run. One of the clips that got out from the spring game was Mendoza rolling to his left on the 3rd down and hitting Holden Stays, and Stays making a sick catch over the defender. They're like, we talk about like improving each year and like making slight adjustments so that the offense doesn't just become like known to the conference and you can be stopped. Like this offense is going to look completely different this year. Like you think that Mike Shanahan and Kurt Signetti aren't sitting there going like, I wonder if we could roll out Fernando Mendoza to the right. I wonder if we could roll out Mendoza to the left. Like that just wasn't in the offense. You couldn't run hard play action. You couldn't run naked boot. Like you couldn't do like quarterback option, which I'm not saying they're going to run Mendoza like that, but like it just opens up a whole nother side of the playbook that we didn't even get to see. And it just makes the playmakers on this team much more dangerous. Where do you rank Indiana in the conference? Penn State's clear front runner, then probably Ohio State, Oregon. Does Illinois make that leap? I think Indiana is a clear top 5 team in the conference if you're going to rank them today. I think they have an opportunity to knock out an Oregon or a Penn State and cement themselves into that upper tier. Obviously, they're not favorites going into those games, so it's hard for me to say they're above any of those teams. Like Ohio State, national champion, obviously they're the number one coming back. Like Penn State, you have people saying they have arguably the most talented roster in the Big Ten. Like that's going to be a really good team. The really exciting part for Indiana is they get an opportunity to play 2 of those teams that you mentioned in there, Penn State and Oregon, and Illinois, obviously, as well. I'll do the quick Illinois thing. Here's the Illinois thing. My biggest problem with the way Illinois is being perceived in regard to Indiana is Illinois wasn't a bad team last year. Illinois was a really good team last year. Illinois, I don't think, deserves the top 10 ranking they have right now. That should 100% be Indiana's. And that's my biggest problem. But it's not because Illinois was a bad team. I'm so happy that matchup is early in the season, so we get to see which teams on which level. But I don't see I don't see Illinois having a better year than they had last year. I'll put it that way. But yeah, I do think Indiana's like a clear cut above that Illinois tier, that Iowa tier. And again, it's like I really hope coming out of that Illinois game that, like, regardless of the result, right? I just want the perception to be that 2 good football teams played, and the result, and the result shows which team's better. Because if Indiana goes in there and whoops Illinois, I know that the talk after that is going to be, oh, well, Illinois was misranked during the preseason polls, and that's why you shouldn't go by preseason rankings and all that good stuff. And if Illinois beats Indiana, then it's going to be like, well, Illinois isn't a good team and Indiana was all hype. And, so it's going to be completely negative either way. So it's like, I hate that that's the perception of these games going in and coming out. Like it can't just be two good teams are playing, but I think that's really what it is. I think two good football teams are playing and Indiana gets them at home. But like, I think on a neutral field, Indiana's better. And I think if Illinois was at home, Indiana's better. So um, that's kind of my thoughts on that. Second question. What's going to be the impact of going from Kadick to Coogan? Again, I love Mike Kadick, huge fan. He has personally talked about how difficult it was for him playing in Ohio State, specifically that he wasn't able to hear. You go to a guy just specifically in that realm of Pat Coogan, who was starting games at Notre Dame, not afraid of the crowd noise, been there, done that. Another senior. Kadick was a guy who had some snapping experience, but really, I think, played left guard is the year before he transitioned to center. Coogan's coming off the year playing center. When we talk about the areas where Indiana upgraded, the center position is one where like it's hard to tell how stark of the upgrade it is right now because Kadick was really good last year, but like Pat Coogan's a really good player. And I think that's going to be really, really impactful when it comes to playing in these bigger games. Question number 3, and this is one we've been seeing a lot, but it's who's going to start in the slot. Obviously, on this platform, we've been talking about the three-headed monster. That's Surratt, Cooper, EJ Williams. Like we believe those are the best 3 receivers on the team. And at the end of the day, you want your best guys on the field. That being said, they did go get Jonathan Brady, the Cal transfer. They do have Miles Kendrick, and LeBron Bond, who are both on campus during the spring, playing that slot role with nobody else available to play it. Mekhi Jackson obviously hurt his hamstring. He's going to have the opportunity to work into the slot. So obviously, they don't really have that prototypical speed slot guy like a Miles Price who played there last year, but they have a ton of versatility and a ton of guys. And I didn't even mention Davion Chandler, who's on campus now, who's going to have an opportunity to work into the slot as well. And then question 3.5 being, will a non-receiver get significant snaps in the slot this year? And I think the answer is yes. I think there's an opportunity. You see Holden stays in the slot a little bit. I think you're going to see Lee Beebe in the slot too, utilizing his pass catching ability. I don't know if that, like, you're obviously not going to have, like, that's not going to be their dominant package, but I wouldn't be surprised to see multiple positions get work in the slot as opposed to just receivers. Question number 4 being, can Indiana's defensive line replicate production? Obviously, huge fan of the names they brought in and the names they have coming back. But you look at the guys they lost: CJ West, round 4 draft pick in the NFL. James Carpenter's got an opportunity to make a roster in Jacksonville. 2 really good players, highly productive players, didn't come off the field much, obviously, although they do rotate a lot at those positions. So you look at Jose Wheeler, you look at Tyreek Tucker, Mario Landino. Obviously, Kamara is back, and they brought in Kellen Wyatt and Stephen Daly as well to play the ends. We talk about Ndukwe a lot on this podcast. We really like him. Kyler Garcia has been flashing. He's got hopes and dreams of being a freshman All-American. He's chasing that. There's just a lot of talent in that room. The scheme is just, Brian Haynes' scheme is so perfect and so nice for the front 7, but the defensive line especially, you just have to wreak havoc. So it's got to be awesome playing in that front. So I would assume or would imagine that, like, for somebody like Jose Wheeler, one of the reasons why I liked him so much is because if you look at his Alabama tape, he's literally playing like defensive end as a 300-pounder and then 2-gapping and making plays on the inside of the line and just being an absolute problem. Like that dude now, instead of having to cover 3, 4, or 5 gaps, it just gets told to attack is like, yeah, I think a lot of these guys have higher ceilings than maybe people think. And in the right hands, those hands being Brian Haynes and the guys in the defensive room, like, I think we can replicate production. I don't know if it'll be the same as, well, actually, if you look at Kamara and you look at the way Wheeler can play, like they actually even might have more NFL talent on this line, quote unquote, than they did coming out of last year, which is exciting. Question number 5 is, where's the linebacker depth at? Obviously, the top 3 are cemented. Aiden Fisher, Roe Hardy, who's just, we continue to say, just the best football player you've ever seen, and Isaiah Bones-Jones. Obviously, those are your top 3. Utzinger and Caden Turner are there, and they also have Quentin Clark, who's a sophomore. They also have Paul Nelson and Jamari Farmer hit the portal, so Paul Nelson's kind of the only guy in that room. They are a little light They brought a Rutgers or tried to bring the Rutgers transfer who ended up at Miami on campus. That didn't really work out. So we'll see where they end up going there. Is the linebacker room set? I would lean towards no. My guess is they're going to try and bring in a depth piece there. Question 6. How early will we see the freshmen? It really is an interesting question because last year you have Signetti going to the season being like, we don't play freshmen. It's not happening. You look at the way they treated D'Angelo Pons at JMU, and he didn't really play until the third game or fourth game of the season. Obviously, he was a freshman All-America there. Last year, I believe we saw Mario Landino on the second series of the year. Ro Hardy played pretty much all year. Charlie Becker was on special teams. Like the freshmen were playing significant minutes. That class was really or significant minutes. They were playing like a significant amount of time. They weren't. Well, Ro Hardy was in the starting role, but this freshman class, and there was a lot of talented guys in the 24 class. The 25 class is more talented than the 24 class. Like a guy like Byron Baldwin Jr. is going to find his way onto the field. A guy like Jalen Hollywood Bell even might find his way onto the field. Like a guy like Seonta Stewart might find his way onto the field. We've talked about Davion Chandler and Miles Kendrick and LeBron Bond. Like there's a lot of really, really talented freshmen in the room and admittedly at positions of need. And so if these guys are doing the right things over and over again, especially the guys who are on campus in the spring, yeah, they're going to play early and often. Like there is no discriminating on this Kurt Signetti team. Like as much as he can say he doesn't like to play freshmen, like the best players play. And so again, if the guys are doing the right things, if they're maturing the right way, if their heads in the playbook and they're working, these guys are going to get on the field like the best football players play. Question number 7. What does the running back rotation look like? I truly believe it's going to be a 3 deep. I think when people talk or ask about the running backs, they kind of forget because of the way we used Lawton and Ellison last year that there are 3 guys in the room. Kalen Black obviously was dealing with injuries last year, so he didn't really get used towards the back end of the season. But they have 3 talented backs in this room, whether it's Roman Hemby, Lee Beebe Jr., or Kalen Black. Like these dudes are all can be effective guys, and they're going to try and keep all of them fresh. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that all 3 of those guys are going to play. And like I said before, with BB potentially being used in the slot, like I wouldn't be surprised to see 2 or more of those guys on the field at the same time. Like it's a really exciting room. Obviously, John Miller's an excellent coach, and they're going to keep those guys fresh. But I think people are using last year to look at, okay, cool, they have 3 guys, but it's really going to be 2. No, I think they actually really would like to use 3, and they're going to try and use 3. Question number 8. How quickly does the secondary gel? I asked this only because last year it took until like the 4th or 5th game of the season before they moved Amari Farrell and put Terry Jones in. Obviously, the Indiana defense played really well last year. A lot of it starts with the defensive line, and obviously D'Angelo Pons put him on the field, set and forget type of player. Amari Farrell the same way. They do have some new pieces in the secondary. We do believe that they upgraded talent and they did get better. How quickly do they take to gel? We're hoping it's more like it's by the 4th game because they play Illinois, but they have a lot of talent, and while that's a good thing, it also like makes it a little hard to figure out who should be on the field. So both in a good way. I mean, that is a good thing, but it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. And then question 8.5 being, did Indiana solve its problem over the middle? Remembering specifically the Ohio State games and the Notre Dame games where they got killed, and obviously Emeka Egbuka, first round NFL draft pick, extremely talented. It's like pick your poison with that Ohio State team. But I think it's Jordan Faison or Julian Faison from Notre Dame killed them in the college football playoff game. They were having so much trouble covering the slot. Obviously, they went and got Devon Boykin. You're bringing in a guy like Byron Baldwin Jr. You have Amari Farrell. You brought in Lewis Moore, Jamari Sharp, and Gandy and Knight, and like you went and added a whole bunch to the secondary. So let's see if that's able to translate into stopping a lot of these talented teams that are going to want to spread you out. Like obviously there's something Jamie Jordan talked about, but against Iowa, you're probably not going to put 5 or 6 defensive backs on the field, but against a team that's going to want to spread you out, like that needs going to be tested. So very interested to see if that's something that they went out and addressed. SoCal loves the pod. I noticed that Indiana was ranked outside of the top 25 in this breakdown. Roster depth, coaching concerns, schedule strength, something else. Curious to hear your take. Um, I just think people are just aren't paying attention, to be honest. I think if you I'm not really worried about the schedule. Coaching concerns are just you haven't been paying attention to Kurt Signetti and the way this staff operates. Like again, the schedule, I've gone to bat for Indiana's schedule. I obviously when you play in the Big Ten and you play a grueling schedule like that, it really shouldn't matter what your non-con is because you're going to be tested either way. It again, and it's something I tweeted this week, but it's hard to believe that the 2025 Indiana Hoosiers get to run back the we have a chip on our shoulder because nobody believes in us like feeling that they had in 2024. Like a team that like went to the college football playoff and brought its whole coaching staff back and upgraded at quarterback and upgraded at all these important positions and returned 3 All-Americans on defense should be getting respected, not said that was a fluke and there's no way they can do it again. So to me, it's just crazy. It's you're not paying attention and you're looking at stars, and that's the biggest problem. It's like, yeah, Brad's been talking about this like micro sense, macro sense when it comes to recruiting, and I do agree with him. Like in a macro sense, you do want the best players, but when it comes down to it, like production over potential, give me the guy who's going to go out in the field and do it versus the guy that the sites say are going to. Question number 9: will the starters play special? Oh, hold on. When do you expect the next wave of commitments? That's a great question. That's actually something I was mulling over today because we are kind of in that dead period. I would say as we start like ramping up towards like fall camp, so that'd be like middle towards end of July, I would think football activities really start up again. I don't think they're taking a break, but I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple commits this week, next week, whatever. Sig had mentioned also on that um, interview with Greg McElroy that there was a couple guys who had committed already that hadn't announced yet, and I'm not sure if he was talking about guys that had already announced or guys that have yet to announce. So you really just never know with this team. They continue to surprise me, and like with the Jay Timmons commitment, like I was falling asleep on a Monday night, all of a sudden we have a son of an NFL player like on the roster. So it's you really never know with this team. But I would be surprised if like actually hold that because I'm gonna get there. Question number 9: will starters play special teams? I think the answer is yes. And I think this might be the last year that that happens. And I believe it's just because of the roster depth. Like special teams obviously super important. Indiana's got a great special teams coach, Grant Kane, but you saw the one game where Indiana wasn't up to par in special teams. It really hurt them. That was Ohio State. So I think that given that Indiana doesn't plan to punt much, that you are going to see maybe a guy like Aiden Fisher, probably maybe not Pons, but maybe Pons. Like he was a gunner last year. So I think we are at least early in the season or against really good teams. You're going to see the starters play special teams. I think that's just how SIG does it. But I think obviously you want to get to a point with your roster where like maybe your best players aren't playing special teams at the same time. Like that's the best way to get a roster spot at the NFL. So um, Brad's been talking about it for a couple weeks, how necessary it is to have your like with Charlie Becker, for example, like he was playing gunner last year, probably going to play gunner this year. Like getting that experience, having that trust from the coaching staff, super, super important. So I do think the starters will end up playing special teams. Question number 10: do I believe attendance is going to be an issue this year? Emphatically, no. I mean, somebody who tried to get season tickets or looked into season tickets maybe can like I haven't seen all the data on that, so that maybe somebody can help me out. But I'd be hard pressed to imagine it's going to be easy to get a ticket to watch this team play, especially if they do what I think they're going to do to Illinois, which is win it emphatically. Question number 11. What week will major networks realize last year wasn't a fluke and College Game Day and Big Noon Kickoff start fighting over who gets to come to Bloomington? I think I hope it happens after the Illinois game. I have my doubts. I think maybe after the bye week, like if you beat Illinois, beat Iowa on the road bye week, I think after that, if you're sitting there at 5-0, I think that's what the record would be. Then you have all these networks going like, oh my God, like what happened last year just wasn't a fluke. Like this is the real deal. I'd like it to happen before that. I think they should be salivating and fighting over Indiana versus Illinois in week 4. Like it's going to be a massive Big Ten matchup, but I can see it kind of being overshadowed just because of the brands, which again is a mistake given the current way college athletics is shifting so rapidly. And you have two universities that are clearly putting their foot down and deciding they're going to do something about their football futures. I'd be diving all over that game if I was a network. I think it probably happens after that. But you saw last year, like I believe it was week 8 or 9 was when game day was there. And I think the week before, like Big Noon and Barstool were there. So it took a little bit longer last year, but I don't think it takes quite as long this year. Question number 12. Who takes the biggest year two leap with SIG? So this for me eliminates all the JMU guys because obviously this wouldn't be year two with SIG. And it took too much of my too much effort to kind of figure out who had only spent 1 year with SIG before. That wasn't looking that far past. So but here's the list I came up with. It's multiple choice. I have my answer. Amari Farrell, Elijah Hardy, Mario Landino, Jamari Sharp. My answer is Carter Smith. Carter Smith has been super hard on himself. He's been saying that he's got to has all these things to work on and he's regressed and all this stuff. And Cignetti just keeps calling him a really good player. And like he said, he also has 2 years of eligibility left and probably shouldn't have let that one slip. But I'm expecting a huge year from Carter Smith. Obviously, third straight year starting at left tackle. He's the anchor of that offensive line. The center is the leader of the line, but you could argue that because of the longevity and bits like at Indiana and also it being his second year in the system, that really Carter Smith's the leader of that line. And obviously, he's going to play a huge role in this football team. And I think, again, second year in the system, second year in the run game, third year with Bosted. Like I don't think it's a stretch to say Carter Smith can be a highly touted prospect going into next year's draft, but hopefully he comes back to school. We'll see. Question 13. Who improves their draft stock the most? Your nominees are Mikhail Kamara, Roman Hemby, Hosea Wheeler. Oh, actually, I guess I just should have done this, but whatever. And Omar Cooper Jr. But I think it's gonna be Roman Hemby. I think Roman Hemby is a really, really good player. And because Maryland struggled so much last year, people are kind of like almost forgetting what his ability looks like. We talked about Fernando Mendoza getting hit a lot last year. Like the offensive line that Hemby is going to be running behind this year is significantly better than the offensive line he ran behind last year. This is a kid who was a true freshman starter in the Big Ten, explosive, like built like a running back, experienced, like this is Roman Hemby is a guy who like I feel like if you can pick somebody to just drop in like the Kurt Cignetti offense, it's like that's who it is. I'm expecting a huge year from Hemby. What do I think Landino's role will be? Does he move inside? That'll be interesting because I don't, and I guess it is. I have two more questions, but does Landino move inside? I think it depends on if they're done adding in the transfer portal or not, specifically at the position. As the roster is currently set, I don't know if it makes sense for him to move inside because at the very worst, if you're kicking Kamara back to the other side, he's in the two deep at defensive end and they're pretty set on the inside. That being said, the dude is pretty damn disruptive at defensive tackle. And if you think that's his best position, then obviously you move him inside. I've talked about the versatility of Wheeler. I wouldn't be surprised to see any of these dudes playing across the defensive line in different spots. Landino's a guy who's shown the ability to be successful on the edge. Obviously in high school, very successful in the middle. I think he's listed on Indiana's website at 275. So he could move inside. I would say though, he probably stays outside, bearing Indiana adds another really high impact edge that forces Kamara to move back to the other side. Question number 14. Will the class of 27 start before the class of 26 finishes? That's something I was kind of like, I wrote it down and then I was like, I thought I had an answer to this and I really don't know because obviously Indiana's got the chance to do something really special this year. They can double down on the year they had last year and that just does wonders for their recruiting momentum. 10xing whatever they've been doing right now, right? There are a lot of really intriguing in-state prospects in the class of 2027. Obviously, Showtime Sales came out this week and was like, and this was something we talked about last week too. Like, he's not anywhere near like moving down his list of schools or anything like that. But you think of a prospect like that, you think of somebody, maybe a young kid in the class of 2027 who's looking at Indiana football and is like, I want to be a part of that from in-state. Like, I'm not ruling out that they can play well enough to inspire somebody in the class of 27 to commit before they finish the class of 26. And then piggybacking off of that, question 14 and a half being, will Indiana go into the season without a quarterback in the class of 2026? And I don't think they will. It'll be interesting to see if they can get it done before games start. I think, given the track record of the staff and Kurt Cignetti's ability as a recruiter, that there's a high chance they are able to like lock in a commitment before the season starts. We'll see. I mean, with the buzz Mendoza's starting to get, again, I'd be stunned if you don't have people going out of their way to try and get in front of these coaches. But I feel like that's definitely something to monitor, because something that Brad's been beating into the ground is, excuse me, that it's hard to recruit the offensive side of the ball without a quarterback. So definitely something to keep an eye on. Question 15, is Indiana done in the transfer portal? I'm going to say absolutely not. I believe their scholarship count right now is at 79 or 80, somewhere around there, depending on how it got affected by Jamari Farmer's decision to enter the transfer portal. Sig said that they're going to use all 85 scholarships. I highly doubt they're going to give out 5 walk-on spots, especially with Indiana's ability to spend money. You saw they were going after a linebacker. They kind of swung and missed on the Rutgers linebacker, but that doesn't mean that somebody else isn't out there. We trust these guys as talent evaluators. I would be stunned if they were done adding to this current football team, and I would expect at least 2 or 3 more additions before fall camp starts. Question number 16. Is USC the last one? Meaning, is this the last time that another university is going to come into Bloomington, think they can just poach one of our coaches? Hold on. PK's got getting the cart way ahead of the horse. Do you think Mendoza will stay for a second year? Not if he plays the way I think he's going to. No, I think if he puts up Curtis Rourke type numbers, displaying the athletic ability that it sounds like he has, and Indiana has another elite season like they did last year, like in the best way possible, that kid's going to the NFL. Like you don't retain a talent like that. He's just too good to be in college at that point. And you just, again, like it's, I said this about Pons a couple episodes ago, but it's like, if these guys are having good enough seasons where like the NFL is going, yeah, you're a first round, you're a second round draft pick. Like I would love for those guys to come back, but like it becomes really, really good for the Indiana brand to have elite football players playing on Sunday. Like that's one of the things that is hurting the university currently, is that if you look at the NFL, like the best players come from like 5 universities. If Indiana can start to change that, and a lot of the impact guys start coming out of Bloomington, forget about what having a successful season does for recruiting. Like that's almost more important. And then if you're going to have success on top of that, like I'm not going to say it doesn't matter if Mendoza stays for a second year or not, because obviously if you're talking about a kid like Andrew Luck, he's a special type of talent. You don't just like go out and replace that guy. But in saying that, like if you're going to talk about the top 1% of draft prospects, like prospect in the 10% is still going to be pretty damn good. So it just makes Indiana's ability to go out and get the next guy that much easier. CJ West is gone. Out of Tyreek Tucker, Dominic Ratcliffe, and Hosea Wheeler, who do you see having the best shot as emerging as a draft prospect this season? I think it's Hosea Wheeler, and I think it's because of defensive versatility and what he has on tape prior to coming to Indiana as well. John says Fernando plays 1 year, Alberto plays 3 years, Cherry takes over. Boom. It's a contingency plan. It's already written. There's really not much we have to do now except watch. But is USC the last one? Meaning, is this the last time another university decides they need a coach and they walk into Bloomington and they say, cool, we'll take your best guy and here's a bunch of money, except they leave Bloomington without a coach? Like, obviously, again, I wrote about this for vocfb.com. I would like to say this is, I hope this is the last time. I hope that other universities look at what happened to a school with the stature of USC, with the football history of USC, with the bankroll of USC, targeting the position that they were positioned, like targeting strength coach. We're not even talking about, and obviously, like I've been gushing over the importance of Derrick Owens and how important that specific position is, but like they weren't going after an offensive coordinator. They weren't going after they were going after the strength coach, and Indiana stiff armed them so far into the dirt they had to go somewhere else. I would like to think that's an emphatic enough statement to let other universities know that you can't come in here anymore. But then again, like I would have thought that Ohio State and Penn State knocking on the door for Brian Haynes would have sent the same message, but who knows? It's obviously a lot of people that aren't like again, there's how much college football can you possibly pay attention to, right? So if you're running the brass at USC, like maybe you weren't even like maybe you caught 5 football games this year, right? So you're like, "Oh, go get Indiana's guy." Like that's probably the best guy, right? It's like you can't just come in here and take that anymore. So I do actually think USC is the last one, at least in terms of like the way it looked. Like the Tino thing is a little different, right? Like he took a promotion. So if you're not going to be able to keep all the guys if you just eventually people want to move up. But in terms of lateral moves, like I think that era of just lateral moving or thinking you can present a coach and upgrade to the same position is just over. Number 17. This is my last question for football. Where does NIL legislation leave Indiana amongst the pack? Obviously, Signetti had the like quote fest article a couple weeks ago saying there are teams spending $40 million. They then go head to head with Miami, or not head to head. There's a bunch of other schools in there, but essentially they go after the same recruit as Miami, and like Miami just drops the bag in front of the kid, and that's that. So they're obviously not able to like hang in that regard, right? If money is the only object, then they're out of that race. But at the same time, like we talked about last week with the class of 26, it's not always about money. Like, yeah, if you come to Indiana, like you'll get paid. Like, don't worry. Like Kelly School of Business, like NIL agents saying Indiana's great to work with. Like those aren't things you like. Indiana athletes like aren't signing deals that don't happen. Like that's just not something that happens. But at the same time, like you're not going to get like a stupid amount of money to come and sit on the bench. Like they have to spend a little bit more smartly. And so with the way things are looking, with the way NIL legislation keeps getting pushed back, the House will make a decision on it. Different voices, and now there's a whole committee with like Saban and the booster from Texas Tech, and they don't want players to be employees when the answer is so obvious that they should be employees. And it's an absolute shit show, but I am confident in the fact that Indiana has the right people manning that ship and they're doing it the right way. And as long as they're compliant within the rules and they're treating the kids the right way, and that's kind of really all I care about. So obviously Signetti is going to be able to build successful rosters, and we'll see what happens, and we'll see if they're able to kind of figure this stuff out legally. But right now it's an absolute clusterfuck. Those are the questions for football. I got some basketball questions as well. This is something that I basically closed the door on last week because I was all like, from what I'm seeing from like people on Twitter and from Time in particular, like this is all but done. But do Anthony Leal and Luke Goody get cleared? And they're both trying to get waivers to come back. People are wondering left and right how Anthony Leal has eligibility left. Don't ask me. I don't know. I don't know how any of these guys have eligibility left. But if you look at some of the cases that the NCAA is approving, a lot of these things line up. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that those two guys are going to be on this roster. And that puts the Indiana scholarship count at 13. Do you think another great year that NIL at IU will go to the next level? It's a great question. I would have to imagine yes, because I think if you look at Signetti's ability to inspire people with no base, now inspire people with 1 year base, like I just think Indiana still has so much room to grow as a program. Like, yeah, they hooked in the really hardcore fans, like for sure. They hooked in students. Obviously, the team's good. They hooked in the like family, like the people around. But it's like, when do you become an attraction? When are people flying out of their like? When are the NFL players going out of their way to come down to Bloomington to go to games to see the team play? Like, that's I think when you're going to start seeing it go to another level, because they're less than an hour away from Indianapolis. Obviously, like if you've been there, you know that. Like it to when you start seeing those like obviously like former players come back, and you start seeing like the next tier of like I guess I'll call it celebrity for lack of a better word, go out of their way to start appearing in Bloomington, that's when the NIL is going to go to the next level. Have you heard anything regarding expanding or improving the stadium? Check out Respectable Adams Twitter. He's been tweeting about it all the time. I believe Mellencamp, which is the practice facility, just got new turf. They're replacing the lights and all that good stuff. The stadium, I'm in full support of stadium expansion. I'm not sure if that's a project that they've looked into yet, but I would imagine the better they play, the more money that comes in. Like they're not going to have a choice, and like it needs upgrades. So, but yeah, definitely check out Respectable Adam on Twitter. He's all over that stuff. Question number 18. Yeah, John says Sig is building the next Alabama. He has the blueprint. 100% agree. He is the blueprint. He literally is the blueprint. Question 18. Who starts at center? And then question 18.5 being, can you succeed without a true one? And does it even matter? So I honestly think after doing the like skim dive of the Indiana basketball roster that Reed Bailey is going to end up starting at center. I know he's not a true center. He's not a great rebounder for his size. Like I think he averaged under 4 rebounds a game last year and he's 6'11". But just based on size alone and the offensive talent they have on the court, I feel like that's the way they're going to go, at least early. Sam Alexis, another guy, doesn't have the prototypical center size. He's listed at 6'8". But he's a guy who averaged 10 and 9 at Chattanooga before transferring to Florida and didn't do much there. So I wouldn't be surprised at some point if you see Sam Alexis start there, but I do think Reed Bailey ends up starting there. And then like I've been thinking about this a lot, but in terms of the way Indiana's roster is constructed, is like, can you succeed in the Big Ten without true bigs? And I guess we'll find out because that's not really the way the majority of the conference has chosen to build their rosters. At the same time, like Brad's talked about over and over again, like the most important thing is tournament success. And the Big Ten, admittedly, hasn't been the best in March. Michigan State was the last winner. That was in 2000 or something like that. So I think that the way the Indiana team is built, this specific one, they're built more for March than they are for the Big Ten. And I think they have the ability, the talent, and I think the coaching staff is good enough where they can win enough games to get into the tournament. And then it's just about making noise. And I think this specific team is more set up for the tournament than they are for the Big Ten. So will they be able to get there? I guess that remains to be seen. Will the size end up affecting them in a negative way? We'll see. But I think if they can get into the dance, like get hot shooting, bunch of ball handlers, like guard heavy, like high offensive output, like yeah, you can do some damage. Number 19, how deep will the Indiana rotation go? And it really is an interesting question because especially if you bring Leal and Goody back, like you're looking at Enright or Drake as your second or third point guard. You're looking at Miles or Leal as your second or third shooting guard. If Leal's not starting, if Leal is starting, you're looking at a guy like Nick Dorn coming off the bench. You're not really probably didn't bring in Lamar Wilkerson over Kentucky to sit on the bench, right? But they're legitimately 13 deep if all these guys come back. Now, maybe you say like a guy like Jason Drake, who's coming from Drexel, isn't ready to play in the Big Ten, or like Josiah Miles and Josh Harris, who are the two North Florida guys. Like maybe they aren't ready to play initially in the Big Ten. But they brought in a lot of like athletic, like I wouldn't say ball dominant, but guys comfortable with the ball in their hand who could shoot threes. And I think we legitimately might see like at least at some points in the season, at least 10, 11 guys, which sounds crazy. But if all these guys justify playing time, like who am I to say? Question 20, how quickly will DDV and co be able to mobilize Indiana's budget? I have to say, I've been surprised at the amount of 2026 5-stars Indiana's been offering on the basketball side. Obviously, Indiana, like you're Indiana, you're the flagship university of a state that cares more about basketball than anybody in the country. So like you should be a good basketball team. You should be able to both recruit your state and recruit really well at a national level. But we talk about football and NIL and Indiana not being at the top of the spend list when it comes to football, but for basketball, they are at the top of the spend list. And if DeVries is able to like mobilize that budget quickly and have a plan in place to attack the class of 26, like it could be a really, really talented freshman class coming in on top of the ability that like say what you want about how quickly it took DeVries to build the roster, and I personally don't think it took that long, but they filled 10 spots, 11, like 10 spots from the transfer portal, and I guess one is Tucker DeVries, right? So you count that if you want. Like they can go out and use the portal. I'm not worried about that. And DeVries has a history of recruiting. Coach Johnson has a history of recruiting. The coach they just brought in from Tennessee has a history as a recruit, like or in recruiting. Like these guys are out on the trail. They're hitting it hard. Um, I think Drew Adams, I believe is his name. He spoke to Hoosiers Connect today. He talked about like he hasn't even been able to put his feet on the ground yet. They've just been recruiting the whole time. So uh, they're going to work quickly, and I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana's class of 26 looks a lot, I guess, nicer, or I don't want to say familiar because I don't know how familiar it'd be for Indiana fans, but just like in terms of how Indiana fans perceive the way their basketball team should recruit, I think he's going to be able to move quickly. What do we got? Moving to basketball, of all the newcomers, freshmen, or transfers, who has the chance to make an immediate impact, and who might be more of a long term piece? In terms of immediate impact, it's hard to say because they have three guys really who were like elite scorers at the college level. Lamar Wilkerson, one of the best shooters in the country. I think he averaged like 19 or 18 points a game last year. Reed Bailey, who I think may start at center, he averaged 18 points a game. He was like Steph level efficient at Davidson last year, like tying free throw records of Steph's and things like that. And then Tucker DeVries, obviously two-time Missouri Valley Conference Player of the Year. He's an elite scorer. He can fill it up. He was shooting 44% on 7 attempts last year before he got hurt. So I think probably one of those guys has the chance to make the best impact. In terms of a long-term impact, I would say somebody like Josh Harris like stands out immediately. The guy was a freshman last year. He doesn't really look like anything Indiana's had on the roster in some time. Doesn't look like he's like post game is super developed, but he's like more of a offensive rebounder, a low post banger, like something completely different. And then Nick Dorn, who I believe is going to be a junior this year, in terms of like an off ball scorer, just another guy who like a lot of the best scorers when you think of them are ball dominant, and he's just somebody who doesn't need the ball in his hands to be dangerous. And so that's a guy who I'm really excited about as well. What is John saying about John? John says John Wooden with UCLA in 64 won the Natty with no starters over 6'5". Abel says John, it was 1964. Do you think there's any chance that with success at IU in year one, Mullins transfers? I'm not an Indiana guy, so I'm not in those circles. I'm not like I don't follow high school basketball with Hawkeyes, but I follow enough to know that Mullins didn't have any interest in coming to Indiana. I really don't believe that was 100% a Mike Woodson thing. It's hard when the two-time defending national champ looks at you and says, we want to make you the focal point of our team, or if that's what they told him, and you see how many guards they're bringing, like God knows, who knows, right? I'm not ruling it out, but given how emphatically it seemed like he didn't want to be associated with the university, like I don't think a coaching change in 1 year is really going to change that. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I think he's a talented player, and obviously, like, got to recruit and dominate your state. I think the phone call that DeVries had with the AAU coaches of Indiana, like shortly after he took the job, was a major step in moving in that direction. That being said, like if PK, if you've seen anything regarding any smoke in that direction, let me know because I haven't seen anything. Question 21: will IU be able to recruit the state? I guess that goes into what I just said. That call I think was super important. Whether it's somebody who they should have gotten from a previous class hopping in the transfer portal or going forward, the relationships in the state of Indiana are already immeasurably better than they were with Woodson. I am not a fan of bashing people. One of the biggest criticisms of Mike Woodson was that he didn't have a great relationship with the state of Indiana, and it was really tough for him to recruit there. I don't anticipate that being the same issue, especially with the guys they brought in on staff and the connections they have. And then like bringing in a guy like and retaining a guy like Sisley shows that obviously they have some sort of connection or pulse or idea of how important these relationships in state are. So I do believe Indiana is going to be able to recruit the state. Obviously, there's not really an Indiana person or a heavy Indiana presence on the roster currently, Hopefully that changes a little bit when they give Leo eligibility, but it's super obviously given the way basketball is thought of in Indiana. On top of the fact that you just want to recruit your state if you're in any state. Question 22: is the roster done? I think not, and I think they're going to add. Here's the thing, and I'll run this into another question I had. That should it matter that no one followed DDV from West Virginia, and obviously Tucker followed him. And there's 2 recruits out there that haven't committed yet. I think Hawthorne in the class of 25 and Don McLean's son as well. I don't think it's an issue that nobody followed DeVries from West Virginia. Everything happened so fast. You look at the way, like, he basically went to a team with no roster. It's hard to look at a kid who is thinking they're coming to compete for a national championship and being like, okay, give me 3 weeks to put together a team so I can sell you this. That being said, I'm not ruling out, like, I think, like I said, Hawthorne was West Virginia commit at one point. So I'm not ruling out that being an addition, or if there, like, it could be some late action in the class of 25. And there's still guys out there in the transfer portal. So I'm going to say no, the roster is not done, but I would be stunned if they went over 14. So we'll see. Question 23. Will the game at Rupp Arena be the biggest of the season? I've gone back and forth on this. Hold on. I'll hold that. What style of play can Indiana fans expect under Coach DeVries, and how different will it look from the Woodson era? I mean, it's going to look drastically different. We're going to, like, it just based on core principles. Woodson, everything ran through the post, and with DeVries, it's like everything's going to be spread out. We're going to shoot a bunch of threes. So it's going to look drastically different as far as, like, specific, like, play styles and like what plays he's going to call. Like, they're like, I'm going to save that deep dive for a different time, just because I didn't go, like I said, I dove through the kiddie pool, didn't go into the deep end. But, like, just in terms of roster construction, like, they're smaller, faster. They're going to move a lot. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. And it's like polar opposite is what I'll say. Like, it's just like, imagine the Mike Woodson offense and just think about what could be completely different from it. And that's going to be Darren DeVries. Like, last year, he didn't play a single guy over 6'8". So, and you talk about, like, the Mike Woodson Indiana teams are defined by double bigs, just completely different in every regard. But will the game at Rupp Arena be the most important or the biggest game of Indiana's season? To me, it feels like yes, only because this rivalry is so important. It's been so long since these 2 teams have played, right? So in that regard, I do think it's a massive deal. Like, the game is in Rupp Arena because Kentucky wouldn't travel to Indiana. But, like, going into enemy territory, they play Purdue twice a year, every year. No, I'm with you, PK. Like, that's a massive game too. But in terms of, like, the SEC being the dominant basketball conference now, like, that this game's going to go a really long way in showing, like, where Indiana stacks as a team on the national level. And so, biggest game of the year, I guess I hope it's not, because that means they're playing in a lot bigger games, whether it's Big Ten tournament, NCAA tournament. Yeah, but is Purdue going to be ranked number 1 in February? If they're ranked number 1 in February, I'll change my take, but they're a good team. Listen, I'm not going to say Purdue is not a good team. They are, but Indiana plays Purdue twice a year, every year. They haven't played Kentucky since the Watt shot. Should be top 5. Yeah. Yeah. Listen, I'm never gonna downplay the significance of the Indiana Purdue rivalry. You're just not gonna find that here. So actually, it's funny. My first Indiana basketball experience as a student, well, I guess I wasn't technically a student yet, but after I signed the dotted line, was the Thomas Bryant double foul game. If anybody remembers that one. And so, like, I saw a tweet this past week about, like, if OG Anunoby never got hurt, Tom Crean would have never gotten fired. And like my first time stepping on campus, like, in Bloomington, was when I think Indiana beat UNC on the Carrier Dome or whatever it was, when they played on the Warship. That's fine. SEC could be dominant conference in basketball. Big Ten is not dominant conference. Football, fair trade. I agree. But that doesn't mean Indiana basketball can't dominate that matchup personally. Then the last question I have, question 25. What are realistic expectations for this basketball season? Like, can you look at this team as currently constructed and like, is it fair to like assume they should win the Big Ten? Like, no. Like, can you look at this team the way they're currently constructed and declare them national championship favorites? Right? No, probably not. Right? Like we're going to be realistic. But at the same time, like I don't think this is just some team that's going to get pushed around on the boards. If you look at the way the guards rebound, if you look at their ability to shoot from outside, I think they're going to be a really hard team for teams to match up against. They're going to be deep, they're going to be efficient, they're going to be well coached, they're going to defend well. I think it's reasonable to expect that this is a team that can make the tournament as a like Jamie Jordan said a couple weeks ago, like if they're a 6 or 7 seed with a chance to make a run. Like, yeah, I agree. Sweet 16 would be a great goal, but I also want to reframe it and be like, if this team makes the tournament, like that's an improvement from last year. If this team is a 6 or 7 seed or above, that's an extreme improvement. So I think like I obviously I wouldn't be expecting this team to be world beaters and be ranked number one in the country, but like I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that this is like the 22nd or 23rd ranked team when it's all said and done. So um, I'm really excited for this Indiana basketball season, and I'm really excited to dive a little bit deeper into DeVries and how I like see how he's going to try and use these guys and see how active they are on the trail because like he's got an elite bankroll behind him, and that's one of the reasons why you take this job. So those are my 25 burning questions about Indiana football and Indiana basketball. If you feel like I missed anything, let me know in the chat. Um, but yeah, that's what I got for this week. So I feel like I talked a lot. Obviously, flying solo was a little bit different, but I appreciate everybody hanging out, bearing with me. Um, Obviously, follow us on Twitter at IndianaVOCFB. Check me out on Twitter at Alec Keyser. Check out Brad, who's enjoying himself in Europe at Bradley_Loomis8. Uh, if you're not watching on YouTube, you can hop over to YouTube. That's how you get into the comments. But like, comment, share, subscribe. We appreciate the love. Appreciate everybody hanging out. And I'll be back with Brad next week for another episode of Indiana Hoosiers Live. See you guys later.